I'll be speaking again to Joel Kovel. He has a long academic career. He taught in a wide variety of fields. He's written a number of books, most important for our purposes, The Enemy of Nature, The End of Capitalism, or The End of the World. A few years ago, he set up the group Ecosocialist Horizons. He'll be speaking in Connecticut this Thursday evening, June 25th, in Hartford at the Carriage House Theater. He's presently in New York City. Good morning.
Hi. Nice to hear your voice and see your image.
I was rereading a National Geographic article the other day about South Florida, which for the U.S. is kind of ground zero for global warming, and was struck by two things. First, the developers who just ignore everything and build pell-mell. And second, the people who say they understand that something has to be done, but only see 10 or 20 years ahead and are building walls and pumps and so on. I mean, that's kind of basically where the U.S. is, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, the U.S. is in some respects further along than other countries. Thanks to people like Rachel Carson and an early environmental surge, and of all things, thanks to Richard Nixon, who put through the best environmental legislation of any president. It's amazing. He did that to give him a free hand in his foreign policy, of which more later. And but that's that's by comparison with some pretty hopeless examples. And in truth, we and every other nation state has so far to go to come to grips with this as to beggar the imagination. South Florida, by the way, I would advise you, if you have any holdings in South Florida, to use a little economic logic and pull out, because it'll be gone. It'll be gone. I mean, a lot of New York will be gone. A lot of New York City will be gone. Where I'm sitting, I'm a couple of hundred feet above the Hudson River. Okay, but what's the point when the city itself is largely inundated? However, Florida is going to be inundated immediately. I spent a lot of time there because my folks lived in one of those retirement communities, died there and were buried there, and never liked it very much. I was appalled by how flat the country is and country, that area, and how overdeveloped, et cetera, et cetera. And even now, a decent rainstorm in Miami, you'll start seeing sewage pouring out onto the streets.
Yeah. I mean, it's really incredible that, we have children who will probably be alive in the year 2100, certainly. And they're going to see most of the coastal cities will be half underwater. You'll have temperature spikes, 20 degrees more. I mean, people aren't talking about that.
Well, it's deplorable and destructive in the extreme, but it's all too human to be unable to face up to things. Not entirely, and we can keep working away at that, but we're facing some serious psychological inhibitions, but even more seriously, you have structural, institutional and political forces that are not helping at all. In fact, making it worse. Having just talked about Florida, I mean, it's no accident that Marco Rubio, who is one of the two leading Republican candidates for the nomination next year, is basically he's not just a climate change denier. I mean, you're not even supposed to mention the subject in Florida. It's not supposed to be talked about on any news program. And the governor is behind that, and other high officials. This is truly astounding. I mean, this is like Alice in Wonderland in the degree of just flouting reality. And And here it is, the third most populous state, and it's in Never Land.
All right, let me play devil's advocate.
Sure, go ahead.
You say capitalism is the enemy of nature and it has to be replaced by eco-socialism if humanity is to have any kind of decent future.
Yeah.
But surely some of the billionaires realize this, and just for self-protection of their own money, they're going to have to take minimal measures to protect the ecology.
Oh. Some of them. Yeah, some of them. But how many of them? And what is the class formation? That is to say, what is the unified class position? That's another story. Obviously, there are some rational individuals. The ex-CEO of American Airlines, I'm forgetting his name, but he's a major advocate of radical social change in a good direction. He just saw the light, But the key thing there is X. I mean, anybody in the ruling elite can drop out, but the institutions are such, and the selection process for staffing them is such, that there's a long line of eager beavers who are not just eager beavers, but eager, jackals that are fighting each other for position because the temptations are so great. And then there's always the après moi le déluge, literally, that's the line from, King Louis XIV. Tell me if I'm wrong. I may be wrong. I'm often wrong. Could be very well wrong here, but you get the idea. I mean, this is the king. He sees something terrible happening, and he says, "Well, that's after my watch." And meanwhile, I'm gonna, have a really great idea, great time of it. And then there's a whole, world of courtiers and sycophants and public relations people and people who specialize in denial. I mean, and you have our media, which are organized clearly along the same lines. I mean, they don't even present the weather accurately, much less interpret the weather accurately. You can look at the Fox networks, which have a wide, very wide radiation in our media system, and you're not even going to get things that are like happening here and now, like the state of Oklahoma in its eastern part received like 3 feet of rain in June. 3 feet. You'd think that would be a major story. That doesn't appear on these networks, and so. And this leads me to a much more important, well, not more important, but a very fundamental point. It's to say, Kovel says capitalism is the enemy of nature and we need eco-socialism. Sure, I say that. But I want to be clear what is fundamentally meant by that. And for that, you need a concept which Marx coined, and make no bones about being, a very basic follower of Marx, although also a critic and so on. But he had the concept of mode of production. And every stage in human civilization and historical development is characterized by a fundamental mode, which is a way of producing. And producing is our species-specific activity. That is to say, a spider weaves a web, a bird makes a nest, and so on and so forth. But although in very high intelligence primates like chimpanzees, you can see rudiments of this, it doesn't begin to reach the scope of what humans do, which is transform nature in such a way that we are defined as people in a society. And because production is the effect of labor on nature. I don't mean labor like toil, but labor as human transformative activity, which I would say is our most basic, human natural attribute. We look at us. I'm wearing clothes. We each have eyeglasses. And so forth. We each cooked our food this morning, et cetera, all transforming nature. But you have to learn to systematize that and see just how it goes. And you can have an epoch defined by a mode of production. The capitalist epoch is the one under the microscope here. And I'm saying, and my colleagues are saying, and increasing numbers of people are saying, yes, we need to make capitalism be gone, but not just, not just putting in some kind of social democratic parties or this or that. We need a fundamentally different post-capitalist mode of production.
All right, but what about?
But I mean, that's the level at which I think we should analyze this. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Well, what about green capitalism? We have Al Gore, former vice president. He made that movie, The Inconvenient Truth. He was a co-winner of the Nobel Peace Prize.
Yeah.
In March of this year, there was a piece about him in the New York Times which said he was now an optimist. He sees all the solar panels and new technologies, and he thinks we're going to blunt the worst effects of climate change. What do you think of Al Gore?
Well, I didn't think he was ever very intelligent or far-seeing, and if you like, his famous work is called, An Inconvenient Truth, right? Next year, a friend of mine from upstate, Cambisos, Robbie, made a video called A Really Inconvenient Truth. And it basically, that was 2007. You see, time moves on. That was basically what you'd call ruthless criticism of Al Gore. I have nothing personally against him, but he's a Pangloss. He's somebody with the easy fix. There's no deep understanding on his part. And green capitalism, green is an adjective, capitalism is the noun. And it's green capitalism with green mode of capitalist production. And the mode of capitalist production is to exploit labor and exploit nature in such a way as to create expanding value or money terms. That's capitalism. That's the one thing that capitalism introduced into the world that never existed before, is an economy built upon generalized expansion, generalized commodity form of production. So generalized markets and so forth. So green capitalism will give you generalized markets for green commodities. But the fact of the matter is that may slow things down, and may be an improvement for a while, may mitigate, et cetera, but it doesn't change. And you can see very clearly how it doesn't change. And the Enemy of Nature, I go into a bit of detail on this, and so interested people can get a better idea of what I think of it. But it's basically that the capitalist system is like a cancer. That's the noun part. The cancer inhabits human society and the human psyche. There's a functional unity there, and produces an entity that is obsessed by money, obsessed by endless quote growth, obsessed by endless innovation just for the sake of innovation. It's obsessed by technological imperatives over deeper value systems, and so on and so forth. There's a lot more.
Okay, I know, and you're going to be lecturing Thursday, so I don't want to pack it all away.
It's just a green road to annihilation. Okay.
Right. How about James Hansen? Now, for those who don't know Hansen, he's the former NASA chief climate scientist, who probably was the most important scientist who proved that man-made global warming was a fact. Right. And he quit his job at NASA to work full-time to try to preserve the climate. Right. Now he says we should have a carbon tax that gets bigger and bigger each year, right, and then give all the money back to the people. None of it to the government, all back to the people, so they can intelligently live the most green lifestyles possible. What do you think of that solution?
I think compared to Gore, Hansen is an admirable person. I mean, I don't think Gore's evil, but he's just, to me, nothing to get excited about. I think Hansen shows courage and daring and putting himself on the line, which Gore never did. Gore is just an opportunist. Hansen is no opportunist. I never met him, so I can't really speak. I've seen him lecture. But, and so he's done us a great service. However, being a virtuous and bold individual doesn't mean you also understand the world properly, you know. And I don't think Hansen does. Although I think his idea of a carbon tax is a good step, okay? But if you have a goal and you take a step, and that's it, you haven't gotten to the goal, you know? And so you have to specify the goal. He then says, take the money, which is, of course, politically astoundingly difficult even to conceive of. You know, how are we going to put that into effect? Somehow this is going to be transformed into a viable society. But under what mode of production, under what relations of production, under what systems of ownership, of control, under what kind of a governance? None of this enters Hansen's mind. It's just that there's an entity called the people who will take care of it. Well, I know a lot of people, and we're not ready. We have to make ourselves ready by study and by activism and by struggle. And you know, let me put it this way: if by some chance, not a good chance, but some chance, we develop an eco-socialist society, you know, and have monuments to its heroes, James Hansen will get a monument. Mm-hmm. It won't be, you know, there's no disgrace in the man. He made one really bad mistake, and I don't think he's recanted it, but whether he has or not is not my focus here. That he thought that he had to go with nuclear power, nuclear energy.
All right, I want to move faster.
That's a big mistake, because that's a no-no. Okay.
I'll move a little. Let's go to the left. Perhaps the biggest climate news of the past week was the encyclical of Pope Francis. What do you think about that and his views on climate?
Sorry, I actually read it, and it's a lot. It's long. It's like a book, and there's a lot in it, and for the benefit of disclosure, I'm very interested in and involved with questions of religious, you know, identity and religious politics and things. And this goes back about 30 years, and it's very important to me. In the course of which I've, you know, devoted a lot of study to the Catholic Church, and I was living in Central America for a while during the 80s. So there's a big tradition there, and let me be very brief. So I think that the Pope Francis is compared to the the two preceding popes is a great improvement. In my view, that's not saying very much. John Paul II and Benedict were, I think, disgraces. And one of the problems with, because they were put in place to crush a movement called liberation theology, which came not individually, but somehow as part of the work of the really great Pope, which was John the 23rd. He was Pope from 60 to 63, 64. And the liberation theology was a real effort to actually revolutionize the peoples of Latin and South America. And they used to have a saying, entre comunismo y cristianismo no hay contradicción. There is no contradiction, there is no basic contradiction between a communist society or a fully socialist society where workers only control the means of production and a Christianity. And in fact, if you study Christianity, it's clear that the original impulse of Christianity, of Jesus and so forth, was of that sort. And there's much to be said about that we don't have time for. But what Francis does is kind of elide it. He has a lot of really nice things to say, such as he even goes so far as to say that there's a structural necessity, there's an obligation to restore to the poor their control over their land. He's against all kinds of bad stuff, and he's a very articulate and clever man. But there's two things I want to add to that. One is he never once in that entire encyclical goes to the stage that liberation theology was going to. I don't mean communism, that's a label, but in the state of a society transformed into a post-capitalist mode. And more than that, he never once mentions the word capitalism. I was astounded. Here's this man who's talking about the system and this and that. Why doesn't he name it as capitalism? Because obviously that would lead into the next question is, well, what are we going to do? Are you really going to transform that? And he's presiding over a sequence in the pontificate, the Vatican, that tries to sweep away the bad effects of what John Paul II and Benedict XVI did. And Benedict, by the way, was a Nazi in his youth and an extreme reactionary. And Wojtyła, who was one of John Paul II, was murder on these on things like the Nicaraguan Revolution and the Salvadoran uprisings and things like that. And Francis quotes these people endlessly. There must be 100 quotations from the blessed John Paul, the blessed Benedict, and it's sickening if you know what these guys were and what they did. And it negates a lot of the really good stuff he did. And he did really good stuff. Francis. People like Marco Rubio are going to quake in their boots when they're running as a Catholic, and how are they going to answer him? Because even limited in his limited way, he says a lot of very good things.
All right, we're sort of running out of time. I did want to talk about one last figure, Naomi Klein.
Oh, okay.
Wrote the book, This Changes Everything, Capitalism versus the Climate. She's a fierce critic of capitalism. She does use the word. Yes. Is she an eco-socialist?
No. That's something we have to work out. Naomi Klein's done a lot of good from her book, but and goes a lot further. There's no doubt in her reading her that this woman is saying something that Pope Francis won't say. She'll say, listen, we've got to talk about the capitalist system as such, right? And that's fine. In Naomi's case, all I can say here is, respectfully, she has a way to go, because she doesn't ever really talk in any depth about it. She doesn't, it's a long book, like 500 pages or something. And there's no statement as to, well, what are the dynamics of the capitalist system and how do we think our way out of it? She says, and there is a definite truth in it, that the mass movements that are arising around the threat of climate change, and this is a historical force, a world historical force, can come together and take down the capitalist system. I agree, although I think it's not just climate change, because there's a lot else going on, but in the ecological crisis, I'm sure she would agree with that. But you've got to start talking about what exactly has to be done, what kinds of alliances have to be made, what kinds of strategic or tactical political formations. So we have to go in that direction. And I don't claim to have solved that problem. I do say that I really try to do that in my books, and a book I'm starting up just now with a young colleague named Quincy Saul, which will develop a concept called the intrinsic value of nature, which is the basis of a new mode of production. But that's not just a slogan. We want to really, deal with that. And, hopefully they're going to have that book. It'll be in the tradition. So, Naomi Klein has inspired people, and I think she's pointed in the right direction. I think she has to move further in that direction. So,
all right. Well, thank you very much for talking with me today.
Always a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Stanley Heller for the struggle. Thank you all for listening.